Sierra, south at Sierra, Fisher, 40s, variable, mainly southerly or southwesterly, 3 to 4, good, occasionally moderate. Sydney, San Francisco, New York, variable, northeasterly, veering southerly, 3 to 4, thundery showers, good, occasionally poor. Thames, Dover, white.
Rivalries become more and more heated.
Hey, come on!
Keep going, boys.
Lots of movement offshore.
Yeah, it's crazy out there on board.
And plenty to see from it.
That concludes the shipping forecast.
Hello and welcome to Cowes on the Isle of Wight, where for the very first time SailGP touches down on European soil. And it's part of the oldest and most prestigious regatta in sailing, Cowes Week. And there's a new kid on the block. It's the fastest class of racing boat in the world, the F50. We've got 6 teams of 5 sailors who'll be taking to the Solent in our racing this weekend. And to help us unpick all of the action, we've got 3 experts. Starting on the outside there with the 3-time America's Cup veteran, Matt Cornwell. The Solent is home water for you, Matt. What challenges does this pose for the teams?
Well, it's a good place to sail these boats. It's generally flat water. Generally, you can get a little lumpy if the tide's against the wind, but it shouldn't be this week. We did most of our training here for the last America's Cup, so you know it is good for that. But the tidal current is the really big factor, and we'll see that play out in all the racing here. Getting ley lines right, staying out the current, but you know the balance between not too many manoeuvres and being in the right place. Yeah, this is where my passion for sailing started, so I'm excited.
OK, we'll get some local insight from Matt. And then next to Matt, we've got Chris Steele. He's one of the world's best match racers in the M32 class. You were en route to Lake Garda, Chris, but you decided on a little stop over here and you were treated with a joyride in the F50. How does it compare?
Yeah, it was a bit of a winning call, actually. One of the better stopovers I had. I got to experience a day sailing with the Team USA SailGP team, and you know the breeze was right up there. It was sort of 20 to 22 knots, and you know we were touching sort of 48, 49 knots of boat speed, which was definitely something I haven't experienced before on a sailboat. But really awesome to get up close and see exactly what functions these guys have on the boat. It's very technical. There's a lot going on, but you know put all that together into the racing. It's pretty exciting to watch, and it's going to be a good spectacle this weekend.
OK, it definitely is. And then sat next to Chris, we've got the Olympic silver medalist in the NACRA class in Rio, Lisa Darmanin. Lisa, you've been following the championship since the very beginning. You've watched these teams develop. What do you see happening now we're at the business end of the season?
I think it's been really interesting to see how the skippers have turned into leaders. They've had to make a few little tweaks as the series has progressed, but you know we really are at the pointy end of the season. So you know they're making some tough calls, changing coaches, changing wing trimmers, and we're seeing it pay off in the practice racing. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting weekend, especially with those tail enders moving up in the standings.
It couldn't be closer at the top of the leaderboard, and it's the same story in the middle of the fleet, where Dylan Fletcher's British team are just ahead of the USA, with China and France trailing.
This week has been a big one. One of the biggest milestones in sailing has fallen.
When these boats first took to the water in Sydney, 2 words were on everyone's lips: 50 knots. Fast forward to Cowes, and solid winds, a tweaked rudder and a head start for Great Britain offered the best opportunity yet. On the water, they registered 49.54. But back on dry land, news came in, and it was good.
50 knot club. It was incredible. We kept pushing on the wards, we kept seeing 49s. Great to finally do it and show what these boats are capable of. It's a nice little, tick in the box almost, getting that 50 knots first, and hopefully that just upsets a couple of the skippers a little bit.
Well, the British were only the first to make 50 because they were the first team to sail in over 20 knots of wind. We would have hit 50 by now if they'd let us go sailing.
They were allowed on the water, they were allowed to sail, and they got out there and did 50 knots. Well done to them. But then hearing them saying, oh, it's nice to get one up on Tom Slingsby and the Australians, well, mate, we're sitting on shore.
Mind games? Maybe. But one thing is for sure, when Nathan Outridge and Tom Slingsby first took to the water, they had a point to prove.
Hey, 50! Woo! 50.37 from Scott Babbage.
We did it on the way out to the race course day one.
Yeah.
How long did it take them? 6 days?
60, boys. We're going for 60.
A little later, the Aussies became the first to exceed 51. Game on.
As soon as we did get on the water, we beat them comfortably. I got a pat on the back yesterday for breaking the speed record, but look, there's $1 million prize money for winning the races. For us, it's all about winning events.
We just heard over the comms that the Aussies did 50 and a half down the channel. So I think our challenge is to try and do 52.
And here we go. Go hard. Nice one, fellas. Nice, boys. Nice one.
And we've just broken the 50 knot barrier, which is good.
To be honest, no one in our team really cares about doing 50 knots. We did it a few times yesterday and didn't even make a feature in our debrief. What are we here for? Are we here for racing or are we here to go fast? This event's a competition and all we want to do is prove that our team is the best team on the water.
They play up a rivalry between us, but mate, you're not even competing against us. Whatever.
So Dylan Fletcher and the British SailGP team claim the plaudits for 50 knots. But let's try and put that in perspective, Chris. You went 48 knots this week. You're best placed to talk about it. Just how fast is that?
It's insanely fast. To put it into perspective, it's probably the average speed limit of most highways in your car. It's almost 100 kilometres an hour. And, whilst you might think that feels pretty stable driving around in a car, when you're on a boat sitting 4 or 5 feet above the water, there's not a lot of room for error, and there's a lot of variables that go into it, wind changes, waves. The guys are constantly changing the sails and the rake on the foils, and so any one of those small movements can create a serious problem at those speeds. So yeah, it was a pretty exhilarating experience, and it certainly felt like a lot faster when you're on the water.
And Matt, what does it mean as a milestone in terms of the sport, 50 knots?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Nathan, I did hear him say the other day, 50 knot doesn't matter. It's about who wins in Marseille at the end of the day. But it's great for, I think, sailing, and it's making the boats more difficult to sail for the boys. And it'd be interesting, certainly you look at the footage, a few teams have done it now. They're not 100% comfortable. They've generally done it and then stopped and had a little breather, and you can hear them go, wow, how was that? I think it's a little scary for them. So it's certainly making it more difficult for the guys.
And talking of that, it's putting more stress on the boats. We saw Tom Slingsby get the Australian boat up to nearly 52 knots, but then it breaks.
Yeah, well, they hit 51.24 knots. I think they were really excited about that, and nursing the boat back in just in a slow jibe had what most sailors would know as a goose wing, but when you have a solid wing, the thing snaps in half. So they had a fantastic day, were really excited, and then ended the day on a really big low.
But they did manage to salvage a little bit of time on the water, didn't they?
Yeah, I think Tom had a bit of negotiating skills up his belt, and went to every team except the Japanese, I heard, and the French finally let him on the water in exchange for a few tips and tricks about how to fly the boat through foiling tacks.
OK, so a good sales pitch from Tom Slingsby. We've also had some personnel changes, though, Matt. The French have changed coaches. What do you think's behind that?
Yeah, that's great. At the moment, there's the distinct 3 tiers if you look at the standings, and they're duking it out for the wooden spoon for last place with the Chinese at the moment. So they really want to step their game up. So they brought in Stevie Morrison, very talented Olympic 49er sailor, a world champion, and hopefully he can. They've had just too many errors. They've shown plenty of potential, good speed at times, but handling errors. If he can just sort of wrap that up a little bit. Hopefully they can get a few more points and start to see themselves climb out of that bottom spot, that bottom fight.
Well, the French have been changing their shore crew. There have been a couple of teams changing team members on the boat, haven't there, Lisa?
Yes, we've seen 2 wing trimmer substitutions since the start of the series. In New York, due to an injury, USA changed wing trimmers, and that paid huge dividends for them with a race win. So they've kept the same wing trimmer for this event. We've also seen a wing trimmer change in the Chinese boat. They've got Paul Campbell-James now, who has America's Cup experience. So I was talking to Phil earlier, and he did say that we don't have time to teach anyone anymore. We need people with skills, and I think the teams are learning that those wing trimmers play a huge role in the flight control.
And all of those positions will be under the microscope this weekend because the winds forecast are huge. Right now we have over 30 knots of wind buffeting the Solent, gusts of up to 40 knots, and that means that the racing today is cancelled. But we do have champagne conditions forecast for tomorrow. So today instead we're going to sit down with the 6 skippers and we're going to take a look back at all of the action that's taken place in the championship so far. We're 3 races in to a 5-race championship on SailGP, and there is still just 1 point separating the top 2 teams. It is Australia and Japan, helmed by Tom Slingsby and Nathan Outteridge. And the rivalry between these two goes back a long way, doesn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, the guys grew up sailing together in Australia, but I think what's really interesting is they went to the Beijing Olympics together. They both won gold in London and then went on to do 2 America's Cups. So their histories are quite similar, both Australian sailors. So I think, that tension of, who is the greatest Australian sailor of this time is, quite prominent, and they've had the opportunity to go head to head, and, they're the greatest mates, but the banter's still strong.
OK, and when you look at it in terms of these boats, Chris, they started in the AC50, now they're in the F50, the development of that class. They've definitely got the most experience, but do you think it's played out the way most people thought it was going to?
Yeah, there's no doubt they've got the most experience, and on paper, you could pretty clearly see that they'd stand out among others at the start of the season. The surprising thing for me was I thought Nathan would come out of the blocks firing, seeing as he had a lot more experience as a helmsman on these boats, and that says a lot about the credibility and the ability of Tom and the rest of his Australian team. They came out surprisingly as a stronger starter, and Nathan and the Japanese have been slowly pegging them back, and we arrive at the point now where it's all on, and it's anyone's guess who's going to be the form team to beat this weekend.
And definitely the closeness, the intensity of this racing is creating a little bit of friction between the two, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, it's a great story developing, and I think the press has sort of wanted to make quite a lot of this rivalry, and those two weren't really buying into it to begin with. But I think now, I think when you hear these things so many times, you start to believe it a bit yourself. And also with $1 Million Marseille just around the corner, it's getting into becoming a serious rivalry. It's great. It's making a fascinating spectacle to watch.
OK, well, we did manage to sit both men down on the same sofa a little earlier on. This is what they had to say for themselves. Now we've got the very pleasurable experience of sitting down Tom Slingsby and Nathan Outteridge, the skippers of the 2 top teams, Australia and Japan. Gentlemen, it's always the case when you're watching sailing, you get a sense of the skipper's personality coming through their strategy and style of sailing. But you two have known each other since childhood, so you probably know each other better than most people. How would you describe each other's personalities? I'll let you start, Tom.
I guess I'd explain Nathan as very cool and calm and collected. He's extremely talented, and so he's very hard to rattle. But I kind of like the fight. I like the battle on the water. I think Nathan backs his own ability that he can beat anyone, and if he gets out clear, no one's going to catch him. Whereas I prefer to keep the battle nice and tight and try to ruffle feathers. And so for me, that's a battle, making sure he doesn't get clear of us and get to do what he's best at. For me, the battle tight is where we like to keep the race. So I think he's extremely good sailor, obviously. He's a good mate. And hopefully we can keep the rivalry friendly and keep it going.
And certainly that comes across that you're maybe a little more relaxed than Tom. What's your perspective on him?
Well, Tom's been really generous there, hasn't he? I guess he wants a compliment in return.
Stick the knife in.
We've known each other for ages, and we've sailed against each other and together sometimes as well. And I think Tom spends probably a lot of time sort of trying to piece out the race. And as you said, he loves the combat. Outside of sailing, he doesn't mind a bit of jiu-jitsu wrestling, so he likes to really, go for the kill when he can, and you can see that on the race course. He's quite fiery. When he has a moment, he'll make you pay for it, which is, a huge strength of his. And so, as Tom was saying, I try to sort of avoid the combat as much as possible, get free, go fast. And when we're doing all the fleet racing, I kind of look at the course and pretend the other boats aren't there and just try and piece the wind together, do good manoeuvres, keep the boat going quick. And so if we do get a little bit clear, often you'll see us sort of not tacking on other boats. Whereas whenever I sailed with Tom in the past, he'd always say to me, let's hit these guys, let's hit those guys. And I'm like, it's quite aggressive. Is that necessary? Surely we can just piece this little puff together and go around. And I think that's the difference from our sailing backgrounds, whereas Tom's come from, say, like the laser, where it's very combative and it's all about boat-on-boat tactical decisions, whereas when you sail fast boats like the 49er, which I sailed at the Olympics, and the Moths, which I've done a lot in, a lot of it's about optimising boat speed, minimising manoeuvres and trying to sort of not think too much about the fight. So that's probably the biggest difference between our sailing skills, I'd say.
Would you say that you're a bigger risk taker, Tom?
Yeah, probably. I think I like to think that I keep when I used to sail lasers and Olympic classes, I was a low risk taker. I never liked risk. I was confident in my boat speed and I knew I could keep the race tight. If I just stayed with you, I was going to beat you through tactics and strategy. Now in these boats, I think I'm taking more risks slowly. The faster you are, the less risk you have to take, because you can stay with your competitors and you're going to beat them to the finish if you're quicker. These boats, I don't feel like we have a speed edge at all. Sometimes in manoeuvrability we can get through. Same with Nathan. I think we don't feel like we have a speed edge on any of the other teams. So I'm starting to have to take a bit more risk than I'd prefer to.
And if you want, I suppose you can start to try and press people's buttons.
Yeah, this is good. The closer the racing is, and the more these other teams are starting to compete with us and push us down the pack, I'd like to think that might start to play into our favour, but we'll have to wait and see.
One of the most impressive aspects of your racing, Nathan, has been your starts. You're becoming known as the start meister. What do you do with that? How have you perfected that?
Well, we didn't start the series being very good at starting. I think in Sydney we weren't starting very well at all. I think Tom was, often, if you took the averages, he was the first, on average, around the first mark. And so we looked at that really hard and thought, what can we do to do a better job of this? And in San Francisco, we really worked on our time on distance, and there's like race software on board that helps you with your trigger pulls for the start. And so without giving away all my secrets, but Tom knows them anyway, basically we try to stay away from the combat. We try to stay away from the other boats in that final minute, which allows us to keep our boat speed up, and then we can trigger pull it and go through gaps on the start line. I think if you get in too close to the start, it's really hard to accelerate.
Japan appear to be late, but no, look at the speeds they are going as they slingshot themselves towards the starting line. They have this lane that looks like it's just been built for them, and they are just taking advantage and powering through.
Beautiful start by the Japanese. The Australians thought they had it. They just had to lose a little bit of pace too late. You want to cross that line doing maximum pace. Beautiful job.
And here we go again. Mr. Consistency on Team Japan has found a move that he likes, and he's owning it. They've started well back in the box, and they begin to wind that thing up, gathering speed and heading for the starting line faster than the rest in a very powerful position.
One man that has had their own ways. Nathan Outridge on Team Japan started in the right spot with the maximum speed.
It can be a bit risky if you're hanging back, because if you don't accelerate the way you're thinking, you can get left out the back. So San Francisco, with its uniform breeze, made it quite easy to sit back, come in with pace. But when we went to New York, with how compressed the course was, how we were really close to the wall, and as you would have seen, most people were coming in on port, tacking within the last minute, and then just trying to pull the trigger with 10 seconds to go. So we've had very different styles of courses, and it looks like for here in Cowes, we'll be back to that San Francisco setup of more space, more wind. And so, targeting 30 knots of boat speed at the gun is sort of the goal. So now I've told Tom the secret and everyone will watch this. I'm sure everyone's going to be hanging back trying to go full speed.
We're going to get a copy of this interview, right? And it's going straight to our debrief room. We're going to word for word.
Well, surely you can just remember what I said and you can tell
No,
him.
I've already forgotten.
He's that interested in what you're saying. I love this, a little bit of friction. Just out of interest, are you using eyeline? Are you working it just watching the start, or are you watching the screens in the sail area to try and time yourselves in?
To be honest, it's really difficult to see the start line on these boats, or actually anything. You know, the wing and the jib blocks a lot of your view, and so you can see, like, usually the windward end of the start line, but the leeward end is very difficult to see. So I would say 90% of my starts are just looking at the screen on board the boat, which tells you how long till the start. It's got a number that's telling you how much time you have to kill, and there's a graphic display that helps you find the way to the line. And we have someone else on board who is sort of looking at the other boats and trying to tell me who's a threat that might make our start difficult, or which boat we need to go above or below when we're sort of doing the slingshot start. So and the speed at which they go, 30 seconds to go, sometimes the start line's still a couple of 100 metres away. So you have to sort of balance between the marks, boats and the screen.
Oh, you seem to have it dialed. Tom, you've had the displeasure of breaking the boat this week. You've been practising in the French's boat. How hard was it to convince Billy Besson to let you use the boat?
I went and asked a couple of the other skippers, and they were polite.
You
but
didn't ask me.
Yeah, because when I was asking these other skippers, Nathan said, "Are you going to come ask me next if you can use my boat? Because you know what the answer's going to be." And I said, "I'm not even going to ask you because I know what the answer will be." But I think for Billy, they're trying to improve, and they're like really willing to learn a lot from the teams that are doing well. And I said, look, if you had any time there where we could jump on the boat and get an hour of sailing in, would be much appreciated. They went and spoke about it and said, look, you can use our boat for an hour before our training block starts if you give us some help. And for me, I've known Billy for a long time, and I was happy to help with a few things just in their manoeuvres and how it could help. So for us, we got an hour of training in, and for them, they got a few tips. So hopefully it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, certainly a good sales pitch. I like that one. Nathan, you've had your fair share of breakages as well.
Yeah, we've had a few issues, some gremlins in our wing over the past few events. You know, San Francisco, we had some issues, and then again, it highlighted again in New York that the tech team fixed it, you know, with plenty of time. Since getting here, the guys involved in the hydraulics team over at the shared services have gone through our whole wing, and they found there's a few valves in there that were sort of disintegrating, because these wings are fairly old and they haven't done a full service on all of them. So the guys spent a good day and just replaced a bunch of parts in it. And they've assured me there won't be any issues this week. And we've sailed 2 days now, and the boats work perfectly from start to finish. So hope I haven't cursed it, but so far so good.
Okay, it's been essentially a battle between you two, with the US and Great Britain popping up here and there to steal the odd race. But practice here has shown us that the Brits have made some big advances, and Rome in the US boat. Are you guys starting to look over your shoulders now, Tom?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're able to have more training time, and it shows. We used to sail the AC boats, which are very different to sail to these boats. So we've had more experience, so we hit the ground running a bit more, and we got off to a nice lead. But since we haven't had as much training as these guys have sailed an F50 a lot more than I have, probably double the days, and they're catching us fast. And yeah, hopefully things change and we can get on the water a bit more and get some training in, because we have, after New York, we had a huge list of things we needed to practice to improve. Japan beat us comfortably in New York. Okay, this is our list that we need to work on when we get to the UK. And we've had 1 day of practice in 25 knots, and we weren't able to do boat handling on that day. So we haven't ticked off anything because we don't get to train, we don't get to practice these new things that we want to improve on. So it's really tough for us.
And you had to watch from the shore in the practice races yesterday, where, Nath, you got bested by the Brits twice. That must have stung a little bit.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, isn't it, Tom? Just knowing that, honestly, like, we showed up here and the Brits had done 2 days sailing before our sailing team even arrived. And, you know, to be honest, it's getting a bit annoying that, you know, yeah, we started off in a good position, our two teams, and the other teams are getting way more training than we are. And, you know, when you go and do practice races yesterday and the Brits beat you in both races, we sit in a debrief last night saying, what are we missing? And you just keep coming back to time in the boat, time in the boat. How many days have the British done here? A lot more than we have. So I wouldn't be surprised if they win this event.
Their argument is that you've spent more time in the boat before this championship started.
Yeah, I mean, you hit this excuse, but in the F1 you don't hear Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris complaining about being young and they haven't done as many races as Sebastian Vettel or Daniel Ricciardo. There comes a time when you've got to step up and play with the big boys on equal terms. That's what they do in F1, and hopefully it changes for us and we get equal amounts of time and the best teams win, not a system where it supports people who haven't had as much experience. It should be a fair playing field.
Okay, I think that's a good note to end it on. I look forward to seeing the battle continue out on the water. Thank you, gents.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
No doubt whatsoever that Tom Slingsby and Nathan Outridge feel aggrieved about the amount of time the other teams are getting in their boats. But if we look at the whole championship, and especially the match races, it tells a story of only two teams, Japan and Australia. Nathan and Tom are going toe-to-toe. So Shirley Robertson decided to sit down and take a closer look at the most recent match race in New York City.
Okay, standing by the tack.
Ed, this is always going to be a hard-fought battle. And right from the pre-start, it's boat on boat, team on team, man on man. In this position, the Japanese must keep clear, and we see Nathan Outridge tack, albeit slowly, to avoid any kind of issues. The Australians, though, are on the prowl, and they are looking to get behind the Japanese and to control them. Look at this. They're trying to get in here. And in these boats, as you turn and go round, then the boat accelerates. So it's quite easy to do. And if he gets that position, he's in absolute control. Look at the speeds, though. It looks like the Australians are really slow, that they've no options. And in many ways, it kind of looks for a moment like the Australian has given up, like he's heading away from his opposition. But this is a game of cat and mouse. And Tom Slingsby is waiting to prowl, and here is his moment. Look at the speed on top of the Australian's boat, almost double the speed, and there he is. He goes in for the hook, but he goes in really aggressively. Too aggressive, and in these boats, you're not allowed to cause any kind of collision. You have to give your opposition time and opportunity to keep clear. And although, in theory, this looked like the perfect execution for the Australians, look at the P on top of his mast. And that was a penalty, an unforced error from the Australian team. Big mistake.
You've got a penalty. Make sure we make it hurt you.
Yep.
With the air. Coming up. At border? Yep.
Well, a small advantage to the Japanese, but it was anything but safe. They get to the mark, and just watch. They're determined to jibe and defend. Watch them now. You can see the guys beginning to run across the trampoline. They're all ready to jibe. But at this point, Nathan Outridge looks over his shoulder and sees the Australians. They've come barreling down with great speed. He can no longer pull off that maneuver, and what a disaster. Just look at Nathan Outridge's speed, drop and drop. Advantage Australia.
It's tough. You've got to change your mindset and go into a one-on-one battle and not worry about how slow you're doing the laps. You can do them as slow as you want as long as you're ahead of the other guy.
Never give up. There's always a path to get you back into this.
It's more combat. It's more about beating that other boat and taking control of the race. It's not about picking good wind shifts.
But look at this. We're back to live racing, and Australia have got in front of Japan.
Tom Slingsby, he is a master at it, a real kind of street fighter. He loves it. He said to me this morning, if he has to capsize in this race, he will. He's going to push it all the time.
So by the looks of that, Australia have done a nice job to keep in front of Japan, but they have stopped in the water.
What we've been learning throughout the season is the way the Australians sail, the way Tom approaches the races, and we're just trying to find his weaknesses and we're trying to expose them.
At this point in the race, the Japanese are looking for something. They need to find an opportunity, and look at them, they can round the mark and they jibe slowly to get to that left-hand side of the course. And in these boats, we often talk about data and digital and top speeds, but on this day in the Hudson, it was about good old-fashioned sniffing out the wind. Just normal kind of boat sailing. And Nathan Outridge has seen something on the left-hand side of the course. And look, just look what we see. These dark patches on the water, look at them. Dark patches mean puffs of wind in an F50 means speed. And just watch him accelerate here and sail all over his opposition.
Upman foiling at Japan, so lead change, ladies and gentlemen. Japan now in front. Australia will be hating life right now. He needs to get that pressure, get them bows away and start chasing Japan, who are heading downhill at 36 knots.
The goal is to make life difficult for the other boat and take the opportunities when you can to extend your lead or to make a pass.
Coming down to the gate, though, they have to defend this position. Get to that yellow circle first. You've got all the rights.
So there they are, into that yellow circle, as you said. Japan around first. Australia around second. Looks like Japan are going to go over towards the New York side of the course. There's a little bit of pressure coming in around the bottom of that spectator boat that's in the middle of the course. Remember, these guys can't go near it. It's a 3 boat length zone.
And from here, the Japanese team executed an impressive defense.
All that will be running through his head now is revenge, revenge, revenge.
Crazy puffs here. You know, sailors who are watching, normally you can see the wind, but these puffs that are arriving, they're dropping down from above. There's no substance to them.
I'd say Nathan's got the upper hand. They're sailing really well. They're fast, so we've got to keep working away, and we want to be the top team.
So here they go towards the light that's shining on the water from Freedom Tower. Japan are just about to win here in New York City. Well done, Japan. That is quite an effort.
2, 1.
Revenge has been served.
Well, the match race will be what decides this incredible trophy next to us. But SailGP is not all about the racing. There's also a sense of legacy.
What we're trying to do at SailGP is really create an exemplar organisation that can really drive change. So the point of the beach clean isn't just to pick up the rubbish and to clean it up and to leave a nicer place. We've got to stop that plastic getting into the oceans, into the seas, into our rivers in the first place.
We're not just out there racing boats. This is a much bigger picture than that. We want to stop the situation where you're seeing pieces of plastic and so forth contaminating our oceans and our beaches and our waterways.
You know, we're sailing on these waters, and the least we can do is help look after them. It's a small impact, but every little bit counts, and it's great to be here with a good team cleaning up the beach and doing everything we can, and the more we can do that, the better.
We've got a whole bunch of initiatives that we're looking at. We've got rid of single-use cutlery in our canteens. We've got refillable bottles for all the staff, and we probably think, again, that's probably about 10,000 water bottles we won't have in CAS this weekend.
Taking all our food and partnering with local charities, all the food that we don't use, distribute that in an effective way to people that really need it. The key is for us to really look at each of our areas and say, how can we improve this? How can we change? And we're partnering with World Sailing, that they've got a new sustainability program that we're signed.
We've set over 50 really bold and ambitious targets for the sport. They're not just about clean oceans and no single-use plastic. They're about actually making reductions in our carbon emissions. They're about eliminating single-use plastic. And SailGP have not only demonstrated, wanting to sign up to it, but actually they've developed a strategy, an operational plan that's really, really going to deliver on this over the next few years.
Certainly Australia and Japan have dominated this series, but there are a couple of teams who are starting to put the heat on Tom Slingsby and Nathan Outridge. And one of those skippers is Rome Kirby. He's captaining USA, Matt, and it feels, in some camps, like he was a left field pick for skipper for USA.
Yeah, I was surprised. And, I mean, no disrespect to him. He's from a very talented sailing family. His father was America's Cup sailor and Volvo sailor too. And, you know, he's following his footsteps, but very well. But he's known as a trimmer. He was a trimmer on, you know, both the Volvo Ocean Race and the America's Cup. So I was surprised to see him come into this as a helmsman, as a skipper, and I thought he'd struggle. I generally did, and again, no offence, but I've been really impressed. You know, he's looked really strong. He's obviously drawn this team well together. He's pulled them together well, because one of the real attributes is their manoeuvres, which is, you know, it's difficult when you're less experienced. But he seems to have broad shoulders and a talented young guy.
Well, it would have been very easy for him, Chris. As Matt said, he didn't have that much experience skippering these boats. It would have been very easy for him to just load a lot of experience onto that boat, but he went in the opposite direction.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at, you know, all the sailors on the boat, experiences in the F50s is something that is almost non-existent. But I think what he's done really, really well is he's created a very well-rounded team, you know, from front to back. You know, he's got Hans Henkin grinding with Dan Morris, who are both very accomplished 49er sailors. Dan's on the World Match Racing Tour regularly. And then flight controller Taylor Canfield, who, you know, multiple World Match Racing champion. And then, you know, stepping back now, he's got Tom Johnson on the wing. And he's the one guy that, you know, this is their second event using him. He's the one guy with some experience. And I think that started to show because, you know, Rome's able to just drive the boat. And he's been starting the boat really well the last couple of times they've been out. So I think, you know, long-term looking forward, they're going to be a real team that's could seriously be some big results coming their way.
Okay, Lisa, they were very green when they started the championship, though, weren't they?
Yeah, I remember watching them in Sydney and, you know, manoeuvres were not easy in that venue, but watching them yesterday, they've come such a long way. Foiling, tacking, no issue. Lots of close calls with the Japanese, ducking the boat and, you know, rather than the boat being in control of them, they're really in control of the boat now. So, like the guys have said, Rome's done a great job to get the team together and we've learnt that communication is everything on this and every team member has to do their role perfectly to be a good team.
Okay, well, we sat down a little earlier on with Rome Kirby. Rome, definitely you hold the title of one of the most improved teams in the championship this year. How have you managed that?
We've just, you know, we had a slow start in Sydney, obviously. New group, bunch of young guys, and we've just kind of had a process that we set out from the beginning of the year, and we've stuck to it. And, you know, the results have been showing that, so it's been good.
And it's an incredibly young team as well, isn't it? I mean, you've got a lot of improvement to make, but once those wheels start turning, I'm guessing it just becomes an unstoppable freight train.
Yeah, it's been good. We've definitely, you know, got a bit of momentum, especially after a race win in New York. A little bit more practice here. The guys are feeling confident and we're feeling good, so it's been good.
And I'm guessing you come on the F50, there's something new to learn every day. There's so much going on that boat that you've just got to be able to be almost a sponge to soak it all up.
Yeah, you're always learning on these boats. They're going so fast. Everything's down to timing and synchronization, and there's so many controls on the boat. You know, there's always something you can get better at, and that's kind of what we're focusing on, is just improving every day and trying to take stuff we learn and, you know, be consistent and apply it to the next day.
And you suffered with injury problems in New York. You had to sub out Riley Gibbs for Tom Johnson. How much of a difference did that make?
You know, it's tough losing a key member of your team, especially 20 minutes before racing. We kind of just had to get through that Saturday of racing.
And conditions were really easy there. So
yeah,
it didn't matter.
New York was brutal. It was really tough, and we flew Tom Johnson in overnight, and TJ jumped in, and we had previously sailed together at Oracle. We've done a lot of time with each other, and he slotted in seamlessly. It's been awesome having him. So he's brought something different to our team, and it's kind of taken our team to another level. So hopefully we can kind of sort out some communication stuff and get back to, you know, racing, and yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Well, you certainly, the improvement was visible in New York straight away. You took your first race victory.
Yep. Yeah, we, you know, New York was a funky venue, but we definitely were trying to look to carry that momentum here in Cowes.
Well, we've seen it with the British team and yourselves. The boat speed hasn't been an issue, but the consistency in the manoeuvres is starting to step up.
Yeah, for sure, and that's what you see with Australia and Team Japan. It's just the amount of time those guys have all sailed together. You just look at the consistency across the board. You know, if they do get behind, if something doesn't go their way, they're just able to grind everyone down, and you know the other boats just make a couple more mistakes, and that's the difference right now. Obviously, they're always sailing the boat fast, and they're tactically sound teams. I mean, Nathan and Tommy are unbelievable. There's no two ways about it. So, for all the other teams to get to that kind of place, you need to be learning, and you got to be spot on.
As Rome says, experience is the most valuable commodity on SailGP, but all of the teams are getting more and more time in the boats. And I think it's fair to say that we've seen Rome really grow into his role as skipper, haven't we, Matt?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting seeing the interview, the contrasting style between him and Slingsby and Nathan, you know, who are quite sort of chest-puffing, confident, whereas Rome's quite shy and humble. And I don't think he's one of these people that necessarily puts himself forward as a leader. But I think he's one of these guys that actually naturally he's probably quite good at it in that he leads by example, and clearly he's got a band of young guys who are following him, and he's pulled them together really well. And I think just not having that same pressure on him as the other guys have, especially now that he's out of the United States and hasn't got that focus. I think, you know, it sounds like they're enjoying it. They're enjoying their racing. They can sail with a little less pressure and you know, sail well together.
Well, you've got first-hand experience of this, Chris. You were on the boat this week. Did you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that classic American, you know, positive fist pumping, high fives. Like it's a real, yeah, it's a huge energy that they have throughout the boat, and you hear it with all the sound bites off the boat, the communication. You know, they're always propping each other up, and you always hear Rome say like, you know, nice job, boys, or we did a good job here. It's never I or me.
Yeah, nice job today. That was a nice job, fellas. Second race, boy. We just got a little unstuck.
If you can continue to channel that energy and keep it consistent, I think that's it's going to be a big improvement for the team long term.
And they must be taking positives from the way they're developing in terms of sailing, Lisa.
Yeah, there is definitely no ego there, but that race win in New York definitely would have boosted the confidence going into this event. And I think the guys have touched on it. Like it's such a team thing. And when you talk to Rome, it's not like, oh yeah, we won this race. How awesome is that? It's like, yeah, but we need to be better. We want to be at the top. We're not happy with just one race in the series. So I'm excited to see what they do this weekend.
Okay, there was no shortage of pressure on Rome Kirby racing in New York, but he did manage to take his first victory.
It's not about positioning, it's about pace. Keep an eye on those boat speeds.
Big trim, boys.
They've done all right there to get over the bow of Great Britain there in Japan, and we are off for the final race. 3 boats have parked it, 3 boats are on their way, and it is USA leading by Japan, and France are also in the mix this time. Great Britain off the line pretty much last with China and Australia. Are they just conserving energy? Do they know that they're already into the final? Of course they do.
I think, Jodie, they just got all mixed up with other boats.
And it's a nice race here into the first mark with Japan just getting inside of Rome Kirby in the USA. So Japan around first, Rome Kirby into second. France, great job by France to be up there in third. And Australia are chasing hot in fourth.
And driving.
Have a go at how quick they're going to get once again down to that bottom mark. Both boats doing a nice job there. Australia probably need to get a good jibe. Looks like they're in a great puff. They might be able to get on the inside of France. It looks like they've got a little bit of a problem trying to manoeuvre through that jibe. So I'd say they've lost their third spot there, France. But it's Japan into the bottom mark first. USA in second, and the Aussies are chasing. Because Tommy Slingsby knows that it's all still. You still need to gain points. Every point matters.
Heads up, heads up.
I think they saw, you can see that puff of wind coming down. I think that's why they've all gone round that left-hand side, using the puffs to get up to the top mark.
Go hard, go hard.
It's interesting. They're just saying they might have some sort of an issue. They can't quite identify what. Rome's just tacking off. France need to be careful here. They need to tack as well. Here we go, port and starboard. Very, very close here between USA and France. France, there's a late, very, very late tack on France. Going to have to get a penalty there, surely. Rome and the USA team was still inside that boundary, or that protected boundary. You can hear Billy Besson there, very, very animated there, Shirley. That was very close indeed.
I mean, the American boat didn't give him a massive amount of opportunity to take, you know, to avoid him, and he's not happy. We're just waiting to hear from the umpires. You can see the yellow circles on the water. Whoever hits that yellow circle, the zone first, has all the rights to make the turn.
Have a go at Australia. They just took both those boat sterns because they were on port. Tommy threw it up into the wind, in and around, and chasing Japan for second. So he's come from 4th to 2nd in a heartbeat. Look at this race. This is the race for 3rd.
Oh,
USA
the Americans just squeezed round.
France are going over to the right-hand side where Australia have parked. There's no breeze there at this stage. USA, will this be the big move? Can they come across this right-hand side? Local boys, surely they know what's going on out here, Shirley.
They are flying. Jody, imagine you're American and you're sailing here, right in front of Manhattan, potentially about to win a medal.
Japan look nice out in that middle part of the course, but they have done well. They've got themselves into second by just going to that left-hand gate at the top.
But Jody, look at the French. Look at the top of your screen, ladies and gentlemen. The French are coming back in that massive puff of wind, the big shadow that we see.
And he is coming downhill at a great rate.
Yep, keep it on the breeze. It's going to be headed.
They want to get this, they want 3rd. There's no doubt about that. They want it hard.
Oh, but Jody, he's running out of pressure. You can see the speed dropping.
Okay, fly up.
He's got to do a really late jibe here. He's going to go past the actual, what we call the ley line, and it's going to be another boat-on-boat here incident between, I can't believe it, USA and France. They are just chasing each other everywhere they go. USA are going uphill. France have gone completely past the marks.
I'm not sure what happened on that French boat. They needed to jibe and they didn't. They must have had a problem on board.
Either that or it just comes up to him so quick, that bottom mark, because his course is so short. So a little tiny little lapse in concentration and you fly past the mark. Look who's last or second last in this race. The Aussies. They were second around the top mark and parked it.
The star of the show here is the American boat. Currently in first, right off Manhattan. It's a good moment.
As we've seen, there's been about 6 million different lead changes already.
The stand-in wing trimmer here arrived at Newark Airport at 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Changing his wetsuit on the plane.
Getting close here,
There's nothing for him to say. They're just gone.
And good pressure over their shoulder. They're happy where they are.
New territory for Rome Kirby and the team from USA. Nathan Outridge in Japan are not going to let him have it all his own way, because they are coming down here in an absolute beauty of a gust, and they've gone from a long way behind to 1.5 to 2 boat lengths to right behind him, straight over the top of Japan, USA. That is very close once again. Oh my God!
The Japanese have to keep clear. They're coming in from behind, no rights. They had to keep clear.
They were so close. The whole hull was right over the top of USA. And look who's back in the mix. USA, Australia, Japan. So they have to nail this tack. They've done a really good job separating now with Japan. It was all about a race. Now, USA have to do a good tack and hopefully get breeze towards the finish for what will be a historic first win for Team USA on their home water, Shirley.
Finish it strong, boys.
Finish it strong. You hear it there from Tommy Johnson. A lot of pressure on the flight controller. Don't get it wrong now. We've got 100 metres to go, and USA are about to get their first win. Ladies and gentlemen, get up and clap, because there it is.
First race win. There we go. In the bag. Nice job, boys.
The other team alongside the USA who've emerged as the team that could catch up with Australia and Japan are the GB SailGP team, and 33 points behind second place. There's still a chance they can get into this championship, isn't there, Lisa?
Yeah, well, if the pressure wasn't on home soil, the pressure is definitely on at this event. With losing the 2 races today, there's 31 points up for grabs, and it is a must-win event for the GB team going into Marseille if they want to be a tussle for that $1 million. It does really depend on what Japan and Australia do, but yeah, they've got to go out there and fight. And I tell you what, after seeing the practice racing yesterday, it could happen.
OK, there's a little bit of controversy maybe on the shore, Chris, because a couple of the skippers felt that Dylan really claimed the 50 knots quite hard, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think Dylan was quite clever, and whether they meant to do it or not, they were pretty vocal and put videos out pretty quickly about them breaking that 50-knot barrier. And, I mean, the other teams can say what they want, but there's video footage of them from previous events saying we want to be the first team to do it. We're pushing hard for it. And I don't think they'd be as upset as they would be right now saying, oh, well, we weren't sailing and whatever, if they didn't care. So I think there's a pretty clear indication that they do care. The Brits got out there and did it. And, the other teams will have to live with that now, and it's all about trying to go faster than that. And, the egos will keep getting pushed. And at the end of the day, as cool as it is seeing these boats go faster and faster, it doesn't matter how fast you go unless you cross the finish line first. So it all comes back to that. And, it's going to be an awesome weekend to see how that all plays out.
Well, we got a small indicator of how fast they're going with the practice races yesterday, and they took out both of them in the face of Japan. A slightly different setup, though, to the British team, isn't there, Matt? Do you think that's part of their success?
Compared to other teams, yeah. So they have, right next to Dylan, is the wing trimmer who is the CEO of the team too, in Chris Draper, and a wise old owl. I think that definitely takes the pressure off Dylan. I think he's one of these guys that probably does find pressure too, but that'll definitely help him, But he's been really impressive too, and I guess the surprise isn't a surprise that he's doing so well. If you look at his background, he was quite a late starter into sailing. He didn't start sailing until he was about 11 years old, and racing when he was about 13. And if you compare that to someone like Nathan, he was put in a boat as a toddler. He's from a sailing family. Dylan's parents were ballet dancers, so he didn't come from a sailing family. It's very different, but he progressed to a world champion 49er sailor and moth sailor very quickly. So I guess it's no surprise in this class too that he's been a really quick learner, but no question having Chris Draper standing next to him and giving him a bit of confidence and allowing him to grow as a sailor is helping him out.
Well, earlier on we sat down with the man who's got his tail feather up. We're here with the British skipper, Dylan Fletcher. Dylan, thank you for coming in. Undoubtedly, you hold the title of the most improved team in this championship. How have you made these advances? How have you made this progression?
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting question, and we get asked it a lot. And I think it's really come down to the teamwork that we have. We've got such a strong team, with Joe Glanfield, our coach, and we've been able to create this culture and environment that really lends itself to being creative and pushing the boundaries. The whole team is just sort of, there's a lot of individual leadership we sort of talk about, and so everyone's empowered to do their own job. And I think I feel like when you listen to the comms on our boats, it's very much everyone doing their own job, and there isn't so much overlap, and I think that's why we're so powerful.
Stand by. Forward down.
You've got the CEO of the team sat in the wing trimmer. Does that take a bit of pressure off you? Does it allow you to be more the helm?
Yeah, I mean, I don't envy Chris's job at all. It looks incredibly hard, not only trimming the wing, but running the team. So I'm really lucky to sort of just be steering the boat and just be concentrating on my job.
Okay, so you've made these advances up to this point. How difficult is it to continue that trajectory?
There's so much left to learn on these boats. We've only really just at the tip of the iceberg, and I think that sort of shows from the progression that all teams have made since the start of the series. Not only ourselves, but also the Japanese and Australians, are really getting better. So the bar's always moving, and we've got to just make sure we're staying ahead of and learning quicker than anyone else.
But how do you do that? What can you implement?
We're looking a lot at the data of the other boats, and the other side of it is that from our team's point of view, we've got less experience, and so we're trying to think about the problem differently. We're trying to think of solutions that maybe haven't come from the previous experience of these boats, and just sort of hold no limits. One of our team values is limitless, and we really try to to demonstrate that out there.
Do you think there's a situation that could arrive where you've got Nathan and Tom Slingsby at this level that you're chasing, but if you can start an arc of progression that you could actually blast past them at some point?
That's the goal. Yeah, the goal is to certainly overtake those guys, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we'll be, really on their level. It's one of the hardest things in sport is staying at the top. It's a bit easier to rise up and get up there. So it will be interesting to see that the progression that those two make and how those two teams choose to campaign. But hopefully we can ignore that and just blast straight by.
Definitely, when you get in a new class of boat like this, you've been in the 49ers for quite a while now. It must be really exciting when you turn up for work and every day in the F50 is a school day for you.
I absolutely love it. It is the best boat to sail, the most fun. Like the other day when we were blasting down a Solent at 50 knots, took that nugget and beat the other skippers to that barrier. It was incredible. And yeah, every day is a school day. Like even yesterday we had some fantastic racing and we won the 2 races in practice, but I got absolutely schooled at the start and was really, although it was a good day, I was just frustrated and just want to learn more and analyse those starts.
There's undoubtedly, we've seen massive advances in the boat speed and critically the consistency, but that's brought criticism from some of the other teams. They're saying that you're getting more practice than them. Do you think that, obviously it's beneficial the way it's working, but is it fair?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. We've had no more time on the water than the Americans, Chinese, or the French. We've all had a similar amount of time on the water. But the Australians and Japanese, since the series has started, they'll turn around and tell you that they've had less days on the water. But if you add up the number of days sailing in the F50, not even their previous experience sailing these boats, they've done way more. Tommy and Nathan did a lot of commissioning of the boats, so they love to moan, and it's, to be honest, it gets a bit boring.
And it's an easy target as well. If it's a level playing field, then they need to let you have those days.
Yeah, and I think those two guys, and those teams have got so much experience compared to our team, and I think it's only fair enough that we get a few more days to try to catch up.
Okay, the big one, I suppose, you've got 2 big milestones under your belt. The first one you mentioned earlier, the 50 knots, but you've also got the first capsize of the championship.
Yeah.
Is that a badge of honour or was it an embarrassment?
I guess it was a bit of a mix. We talked that day. We said that someone was going to capsize, and we honestly didn't think it was going to be ourselves. But and I think the other skippers, they all had there were some quiet bets being placed as to who was the first boat to capsize. We weren't on anyone's list, so I think it was a surprise for all of us. But we have to wear it, and I guess it shows that we're pushing. We maybe went over the limit that day, but we've learned from it, and hopefully we don't do it again.
Yeah, an important boundary to have reached. Did you get much stick from the team?
Yeah, there was a lot of stick, and we were really lucky to have such an incredible shore crew to get us on the water for the next day, along with the tech team. But the shore crew did make us do a shoey at the end of racing on Sunday, just to rub it in. And so yeah, a bit of payback.
Your shoe or someone else's?
Luckily it was my shoe, but I'm not sure exactly what was put in it.
Okay, thank you very much, Dylan.
Thanks.
Well, it's pretty easy to make light of a capsize in an F50 when everyone's okay, but make no mistake, that is a terrifying experience. Chris, we'll start with you. What was your take on the British capsize?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think, there was a lot of talk about New York City, the venue itself, and how tricky it was to sail. The pressure was dropping down from the buildings and hitting the water really sharply, and there was some big puffs and lulls, and that makes it very tricky to keep these boats not just foiling, but actually upright. And the Brits were sort of heard saying not long before they capsized, someone is going to tip over today. Let's make sure it's not us. And unfortunately for them, it happened before the first race. So that's put them in a really tricky position, and that's why they're here this week in a position where they must win.
And Lisa, how much does something like that affect your confidence?
Well, I'm really interested in these conditions, how that would affect them. To find the limit, you must push the limit, and they definitely found it in New York. But, with these windy conditions, I wonder if it does play in your head. They know how costly it is, and they know, pre-start not to push it too hard. So we may see other boats capsize this weekend, and let's hope it's not them.
Okay.
But it can be a good thing to capsize too. It's nice to get one out of the way. It's going to happen sooner or later, and actually, of all the skippers, I bet Dylan's the only one who's never capsized a yacht. I think all the other guys have done at some point in other types of yacht. I've done one with Nathan, so I know that's happened. And I think, yeah, you sort of find out where your limits are a little bit, but also you get it done. It's out of the way. Okay, that's what capsizing a yacht feels like. But you're absolutely right. That's it. That's the one now. Let's not do any more of those.
He's taken the fear out of that sort of Damocles sword.
Little bit, yeah. They happen. These yachts can capsize. Right, we've done one. And you get to practice how you write the thing too and go through all that procedure. And, you know, these boats, you can carry on racing if you don't break too much stuff. So, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. And hopefully, like you said, that it hasn't knocked their confidence. But watching them race, track practice the other day, it didn't look like their confidence was affected at all. So it's good.
OK, we're working our way backwards. We've had the 50-knot milestone, and then we had the capsize in New York. But San Francisco was where they won their first race.
Team Australia is coming in very hot. Has he nailed his time on distance here, Shirley?
Well, he's going fast, Jodie, and we saw that yesterday. It was all about hitting that line at maximum speed, and he won that battle.
And Tom Slingsby certainly was quite cranky that Nathan Outridge and the Japan team won all 3 races yesterday, and he's came out today and showed him he is in here for business. So, Team France, not so good yesterday, but they're back in the mix today.
Aussies much happier today. They have a new rudder. They've been complaining about that all day, and yesterday had a broken wing, but all good to challenge for that top spot today in San Francisco.
And it's going to be the local boat, Team USA, leading into the first mark. And this is where the high speeds start coming in. The boats go screaming down in front of the crowds.
The British have done well here. You say that they've got lower, which means they have more options. They can jibe when they want to. They've sailed well from that top mark. Aussies sailing fast. I mean, Tom thinks that, you know, his boat's different today. It's a new boat. He's much happier, and he told me he was going to push. They were going to sail higher than they had been before, that they had to do something to match the pace of the Japanese, which frees up Taylor Canfield, the flight controller, to be a tactician, to look around and to make decisions. And today it's working for them.
It certainly is working for them at this stage. Beautiful shot of both boats going through a simultaneous tack there. On board now with Team USA.
Gotta get going here.
And you can hear there's the grinding of the winch. So the wing trimmer, is in and out all the time with the rope, and the guys on the pedestals are just whining all day, and that's what that grinding noise is.
I mean, the British, one of the standout performances yesterday, the most improved from the last event. You know, they are fired up to make that final, and this is what today is all about. To me, it looks at a risk at the top of the course there. It's lighter often and puffier, and Great Britain have capitalised on that.
They've got to make sure they nail this tack, because there's a couple of hungry boats in Australia and USA coming over here pretty quick. Team Japan also coming back in from the left-hand side of your screen. So we'll see a split here in the top of the course. Australia happened to duck in behind Japan there, because Japan has all the rights of way, being a starboard boat. Team Australia are going to the left-hand mark at the top as we are looking at it, and Japan are heading into the shore. Great on shot here with Team Japan. You see the skipper Nathan Outridge just looking at his options. He can do that. He's actually flying the boat. You look at his right hand, you see him twist the grip on the wheel. That means he's in control of the boat. And that's probably why, because they had to go up and around the back of Team Australia, and that gets pretty sketchy, that sort of a manoeuvre. So the helmsman needs to make sure that he's in control.
Tom Slingsby and his Australian team, they just look different today, don't they? They can get out of trouble. It looks like they have modes. They have confidence in their machine, and he is fully pumped to challenge to get into that final race today.
But it is the great British team leading into the mark for the bottom mark for the second time, and a nice shot there of them coming around the right-hand gate. So they're going to go back out to the middle of the course. Team Australia coming into second. Japan are now into third. So USA have lost out a little bit there in distance.
Well, Chris Draper on the lead boat here in GBR, he said, we just have to give Dylan a stable platform and let him make decisions. And that's exactly what it looks like they're doing.
And he's making some pretty good decisions at this stage because he is leading, and it looks like they're setting up for possibly their final tack into the last mark. Awesome shot there of the tack. That is sensational.
You can hear him getting feedback all the time on the other boats. They're like, Nathan's done a good tack.
And the Aussie team, the Australians, are coming back into it. This is getting close. This is getting very, very close. The Australians still have to do another tack, so they're going to lose a little bit of distance there. Japan still have to do another tack. They're going to lose a little bit of distance. Has Great Britain got the lay line? And we're just about to see whether they have. It looks like they're on a tight lay to me.
You know, they might be doing 40 knots, but it's still a tactical boat race, and I've been so impressed by that. It's still about making the right decisions at the right time and executing it.
And it is the team from Great Britain leading into the final mark for the first time and on their way into the finish. So unless something really, really bad happens, it's going to be a win, and a very well-deserved win, I must say, to the team from Great Britain. Have a go at the race for second. Great Britain over the line first, but Team Japan is holding up Australia. We need to... Coming in, can this be? Oh, Australia just put the bow in massive, and it's Japan in through for second, and Australia just lost out there in for third spot. That was amazing. Here we are, we're on the onboard coming into this finish. Oh, and Australia just buried the bow. You see everybody gets thrown over the front. The bow gets, the hull gets full of water. Look at this. Bang, in they go. And that is gonna hurt. That's not good.
There is no question that SailGP represents the pinnacle of the sport, but one of the most important facets of this championship is being able to feed new talent into it, and that's where the Inspire programme comes in.
SailGP Inspire is aimed at broadening the interests across all of the young people that are interested in connecting with this sport. Many of them would have never had the chance to have a go at this. And then there are others aspiring to then take that to another level, and hopefully they'll be inspired to then carry on and connect with one of these teams one day. So we've got three main pillars with Inspire. Inspire Learning, Inspire Careers, and Inspire Racing. And they're all really exciting programs. First of all, Inspire Career. We're bringing young interns in. They can experience what it's like to be in one of these teams. They can also learn about the awesome technology on these incredible F50 boats. There's also a whole lot of careers that are connected with the event. Things like marketing, media productions, branding, things like hospitality. And then we have the Inspire Learning program, which is taking some of the traditional curriculum subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math in a really cool way. And then we have the Inspire Racing program, taking some of the young sailors and allowing them to race these really cool RS catamarans. And then finally, talented young sailors that are really interested in learning more about foiling. They're going to learn about how to sail a foiling wasp, and then they'll also get out there and race in front of the grandstands on race days with each of the SailGP events. So there's many facets that you can get involved with.
Fantastic to hopefully just inspire a couple of kids to, you know, carry on with sailing and, you know, learn about the different sides of it.
It's huge. You gotta focus on the next generation. That's the biggest thing. There will be no sport if there isn't a next generation.
You got to get into this program. It's going to be fun.
We've caught up with a lot of teams at the top of the table. Now it's time to look a bit further down the leaderboard. And Phil Robertson's SailGP China team have been really struggling in the championship this year. Lisa, you've been watching them closely. Where do you think the big issues lie for them?
So when you hear a lot of the onboards on China, there is a little bit of miscommunication from the front to the back of the boat. There has been a little bit of talk that, you know, the grinders are letting them down because they don't have the sailing experience. Some people might think that the grinders are just turning handles, but they are trimming the wing essentially. So, you know, if they're struggling to anticipate the needs of the wing trimmer, there's a communication breakdown there. So I feel like maybe they do need to work on that teamwork and understand that every member is really important. And if they don't know how to do their job, you're going to have to teach them or feed them more information. So I'd like to see Phil take maybe more of a leadership role in there, or now that they've got a new wing trimmer, maybe he can have that role.
Okay, how much of a difference will that new wing trimmer make, do you think?
Well, you know, Paul Campbell-James has experience on America's Cup boats, on these F50s. So I think that will help Phil a lot, be able to just steer the boat. And I believe that he should be able to direct the grinders to anticipate his needs. You know, you're looking at the lulls and the gusts and saying, I'm going to need a trim on, I'm going to need an ease, and then back on straight away. So that sort of directive communication. Okay,
Chris, you've raced with Phil in match racing. What kind of skills is he bringing across from the M32s to the F50? Because these are where he's falling short. Where do you think his strengths lie?
Yeah, well, obviously, being a two-time world match racing champion, Phil is very, very good at the boat-on-boat tactics. He's done a lot of the GC32 Extreme Sailing Series and things like that. So the stadium aspect, stadium-style sailing, which you have also here on SailGP, is something that isn't foreign to him at all. The hard thing is trying to find the right balance between the two. And, you know, when is it you're trying to make sure that you beat the guy next to you, but also how do you do that and stay ahead of the other 5 boats? And it's a very challenging thing because often, you know, instinctively you might make one move, but it might be the wrong move in hindsight with relation to the rest of the fleet. You know, as well, he's trying to juggle a very mixed team in terms of the culture. You've got the 2 Chinese guys up the front who are the grinders, and then now he's got an Australian on flight control, a Brit on wing trim, and he's a Kiwi driving the boat. So, you know, I think their program is very much more long-term sort of orientated. They've come in and, you know, they're up against it in this first year, but I think, you know, they're doing a lot of things for Chinese sailing, and I think that's a big positive looking forward.
You mentioned there the match racing mentality, and certainly Phil has come in for a bit of criticism from some of the other skippers, Matt, because he has a very gung-ho approach to these boats, which has scared a few people, I think.
Well, that's right. You're probably referring to Tom Slingsby said it. He, you know...
I wasn't going to name names, Matt.
Yeah, let's name it. Tom said that Phil was scaring him because he came in and he did have a bit too much that gusto, you know, like you talk about which is great in match racing terms. I'm just throwing the boat around too much. But we saw them have a little scare in San Francisco, which I think knocked his confidence a little bit. But I think bringing in Paul Campbell-James will help it'll level that off a little bit. Paul's sailed these boats with the BAR team. He was my teammate over here in the UK and in Bermuda, and I think he's had a lot of time in the boats. Paul loves this style of sailing. This is right in his wheelhouse. And I think that would be really good. Just that little bit of extra experience. You know, we talked about teams with less experience can do really well on these boats, but I think with that team, just having that bit more experience in there would be good. Ed's still on the boat, so, you know, with those 2 guys that did the last cup, I think it's all good for them.
OK, well, we've given him a little bit of stick now. Let's let him defend himself. We sat down with Phil earlier on. It's been a difficult opening championship for you. Why do you think you've struggled?
Yeah, look, you know, the simple answer is we don't have experience and don't have the time in the boats as compared to the other guys. And you look at all the other teams, and the majority of the sailors, apart from the French, have all done the last America's Cup in these boats. And it's everything in these things. They're a pretty difficult little boat to master. There's nothing else like it in the world, and you just got to spend time. So we've been doing everything we can to spend more time, spending a lot of time in the simulator, but hey, time on the water is invaluable, and that's what we're lacking.
Where do you think you've made the most progress? Can you see that you've made big jumps?
Yeah, look, we're making massive steps forward, and yeah, some very big leaps, and it's it's good. We're sort of happy with our progress to date. We've had a few little unfortunate accidents, I guess you can say, along the way, which have set us back a bit. But look, we're fighters, and we're fighting for every inch we can get and every game we can make on board. So we're very, very focused on our process and how we're going to get up that leaderboard and how we're going to sail these boats dry around the racetrack.
I think as well, it's fair to say that you've been one of the bravest skippers getting into these boats, but it's not just about the skipper, is it? You have to have strength in depth through the team, and you've made that critical change. CJ's come in as the wing trimmer now. How much of a difference has that made?
Yeah, look, being a skipper on these things now, you're almost a passenger, I would say. You sort of point the boat in the direction and the guys do the rest, and the trust you have to have in your guys sailing this boat is unbelievable. You're doing speeds that will kill you, and if it goes wrong, you're not going to end up very well and in pretty good shape. So, like, the trust you have in your guys around you is everything, and that's just the biggest thing about these boats that I've realised is the danger of it and the speed you're doing, and you're on a knife edge, you know, and you get it wrong, you're going down, and it's going to hurt. So, as a skipper now, none of the skippers are flying the boats anymore. You've got your flight controller there doing it, and then you've got your grinders that are sort of trimming the wing, and then you've got your wing trimmer as well who's just sort of easing it out and waiting for the grinders to trim it back on. So, look, it's an incredible boat in terms of crew work and physicality and how we sail these things. And yeah, we've made one change for this event. We've realised that we just lacked a bit of experience and we don't have time as well. So I guess the nature of this series is it's, you know, we're shipping these boats around the world non-stop, and it's time is everything. And we've just sort of come to the point where we realised we didn't really have the time that we thought we would have had up to this point, and therefore we couldn't really give Ed Powys enough time to get more comfortable and into it and get the experience he needed to get to this top level. And, you know, CJ's come on board this event and he's just given us a little extra boost of experience and know-how, and yeah, it's working pretty well.
Well, you've got the straight line speed, there's no question about that. What are your goals for the remainder of the season?
Yeah, look, one of our biggest goals was to be sailing dry laps, and when we first jumped in the boat in New Zealand in November last year, it was a pretty difficult task. I think the boats are pretty difficult to sail, and compared to what the sort of the cup boats were, they're going a lot faster now, but the trade-off is a lot more unstable. So that's a much harder boat to sail. So we're been working really hard to try and sail dry laps, and yesterday was the first day we sort of did a few, so that was a massive box we ticked sort of in our process along the way to getting to the top. And yeah, you know, from here it's just bringing that consistency, I guess, and trying to make sure we're landing all our tacks and landing all our jibes and sailing the boat fast as well. So it's pretty simple if you look at it that way.
Well, you heard it there. It's fairly simple, isn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, sounds pretty easy to me. But no, I mean, I guess there's all this technology on the F50, but it still is a sailboat race, and there's two ways to win a sailboat race. You sail less distance, so you sail faster than your competitors. So it's nice to hear that, you know, they're bringing it back to basics and just trying to focus on the racing. But, you know, these boats are a handful, and we've seen lots of different conditions. But, you know, hopefully they've got consistent weather and they can just keep the racing simple.
Okay, you mentioned the basics. Chris, what is he working on there? What basics has he got to get right?
It sounds to me like he's very realistic with where they're at. You know, they've definitely come into this series, you know, without as much experience as the other teams, and you know, he's been realistic in acknowledging that. And so, it sounds like he's, you know, talking about trying to tick boxes along the way to try and get to, you know, eventually a long-term plan of hopefully reaching the top. And you know, if someone like him comes into the class and struggles, I think that speaks volumes about just how difficult these boats are to sail.
I was going to ask you that, Matt. Just put in context how difficult it is to sail a boat like this.
It's a great point. These boats are insanely hard to sail. They're the most complicated race boats I've certainly ever stepped on, probably ever built to this point. And they're really not difficult. So, you know, compared to sailing, what he was saying, the M32s like you do, the complexity level shoots up the technology side of things and the coordination you need in the team to have those dry laps. But hopefully bringing CJ in can really help him with that. And interestingly, if you look at the standings, it almost stacks up with the experience of the wing trimmers. Thinking about that, and I think that will, you know, bringing in an experienced wing trimmer, that could really help him.
Well, we've heard from 5 of the 6 skippers in the SailGP Championship, and the last man left is Billy Besson of France. He races the Nacra 17 alongside you, Lisa. What can you tell us about his personality? What type of sailor is he?
Yeah, I think Billy knows how to start. I think that's what we have seen in the F50, and like racing against in the NACRA, you don't want to fight the bottom end of the line of Billy Besson. So I have been very impressed with his starts and the reaching mark, and then after that, it all kind of gets a little bit pear-shaped, but I think they are learning quickly, but maybe not quickly enough.
Okay, it's a really important point, Matt, to broach on here. Confidence is key in these boats, but as a skipper, there's a real duty of care because they can bite, can't they?
Well, it's interesting you said. We had a chat with Billy in New York after the really crazy first day of racing, where the British capsized and the conditions were some of the toughest we've seen so far. And he was telling us he was actually doing the flight control from the wheel throughout the whole race, because he didn't want to put that responsibility on Marie and them have an accident and then her feel the pressure from it, which is a funny thing to hear, really. And I think, one of their big problems is just piecing together the whole race and manoeuvres. They look scrappy, and I think he's got the talent. I mean, he's a 4-time NACRA world champion. He couldn't be touched for 4 years in a row, and so he's clearly a really talented sailor. But I think he just needs to lead the team better. Don't share the responsibility. Don't do it all yourself. Let Marie do it. Let her learn it, get better at it, and as a team, just start to get that coordination better, and focus on the leadership as well as his
one
sailing
thing
ability.
that might help that, we heard from Tom Slingsby earlier on that he did his little sales pitch to get some time on the French boat, and in return, Chris, he's given a little bit of a masterclass to Billy on how to set the boat up, maybe. How much of a difference do you think that will make?
Yeah, I thought that was a really smart sort of call. I mean, I'm not sure how much of their own sailing time they gave up to the Australians, but I mean, in terms of trying to fast track your learning curve, I think, one of the Australian or Japanese team, if you can get information from them, whether it be following them around in a coach boat with a camera or, the onboard footage you get, as well as, having Tom sit in the coach boat and actually talk to you about, what you could be doing better, I think that's a really smart use of their time. You can take that information then and go back to the drawing board and look at it for hours on end, versus had you been going out there yourself and training, you might have done a few dry laps and good manoeuvres and things, but equally in saying that, if you're doing the wrong thing and you're just practicing a lot, you'll get really good at doing the wrong thing. So a lot of the time, having someone else come in and show you how to do it actually teaches you different ways of doing things and opens your eyes to another perspective of what might be able to do something better.
Okay, well, earlier on, we sat down with Billy Besson. Billy, it's been a very difficult opening season for you on SailGP. What have you struggled with most?
Yes, we're beginning with the difficult years because we break some crew directly, and any times we would like just to improve our boat and to make just confident on board, but it's difficult when you're not your real original crew. But now it's over. We are original crew on board, and we are more confident and we can push more the boat. And every team has go forward and better. So when you lost something, is directly a sanction.
There's been a lot of talk throughout the season about communication on board and how important it is. And you've had some flashpoints on the boat, haven't you? There's been battles with communication.
Yeah, the communication is really the key on board. You need to make a choreography on our crew, because we make it for 3 different spots with flight controller and wing trimmer and helmsman on the boat. So that's why it's very difficult to make every stage on the same place and to make a right movement on board, and that's why it's most important to make a good communication. But we making progress.
It's calming down a little bit. As one of the big parts of the progress been bringing the new coach on board, Stevie Morrison.
Yeah, the Stevie is coming on coast just on the last week, and he's a new vision, and he's on the so he's in the English guys, so it's better for my English too. But no, he has good vision, and he know what can we do the first thing to push more the boat. And we are on the fourth event now, so we are more confident on board too. So we can push more the boat, and we can do better and better. And Stevie do it a great job now.
Okay, with that shift in the team dynamic, what are your goals now for the end of the season? Because obviously we move to your home race for the grand finale in Marseille.
Yeah, the grand finale in Marseille, we would like to make a podium. If we do a podium, it's really, really nice at home. But we do make some good maneuver this week, and we would like to improve on races, because it's only the race to make some results. So that's why we make it in cause.
Thank you very much, Billy.
Thank you too.
Okay, Billy, very pragmatic about his position and what he's been doing in the championship so far. What do you think's missing from his game? What can he add, Matt?
Well, like I said, just sort of piecing together those manoeuvres. They've probably a little harsher than before that segment. You know, they do have the least experienced back three, and that's the engine room. Those are the key three people. So if they can, like you said, just kind of get the manoeuvres going well in this event, build a bit of a platform, they are gaining more experience, and hopefully take that into their home event and, you know, have a better one there.
Okay, Chris, you watched them in the practice races. Did you see much improvement, do you think, after Tom Slingsby had been on the boat?
Yeah, to me it kind of looked like they were pushing the envelope a little bit harder. You know, they started really well in both races, and they seemed to be flying a lot higher on the foils, which was something that seemed more noticeable than where they've been in the past regattas of the series, where it looked like they were kind of holding back, you know, being quite safe and trying to take the risk out of it. You know, in the practice racing, they were pushing the envelope a lot harder, and you know,
well,
yes,
they did have a couple of Black Beauty moments where it reared up, didn't they?
They did, but again, that goes back to, you know, some of the moments that a lot of these teams have had, where you try and find where the limits are, and obviously the closer you get to those limits, the faster you go, but the bigger the cost is when it goes wrong. So it's just about trying to find the right balance, and you know, if you're pushing the envelope and your confidence starts to grow, and then, you know, when you do throttle off, it's not going to hurt you as much. So I think there's a lot of positives for that team looking forward, and the more days they get sailing, the more races they do, I think they're just going to continue to build, and hopefully they take that into Marseille.
That's the big pull for Billy, isn't it? That final race on home water.
You know, sailing is so big in France, let alone catamaran sailing. So I'm sure they're very excited to get on home soil down on the Mediterranean, where I'm sure we'll see champagne sailing conditions. But they'll get through this event. They'll learn each race. They're learning so much. You know, each race is a percentage of time on the water is huge. So I'm really excited to see what they do. I think they have the potential, and yeah, maybe be a little bit magic on home soil.
Well, thank you so much for all of your insight. I've thoroughly enjoyed today's discussion. There hasn't been any racing today, but we have perfect conditions for tomorrow. 3 races from 3 p.m. The world's best sailors in the world's fastest boats. We'll see you there.
Do not go away. Anything can happen here.
Bang! In they go. That is going to hurt. Straight over the top of Japan. Oh my God.
Nation versus nation. Fast boats, 6 boats at a time. It's unseen before.
Hands down, it's going to be wild.